Jacob Turner had a reputation throughout the Wyoming Territory in 1889 for one thing besides raising the finest cattle. He openly blamed every Apache traveler for raids he believed had destroyed his father's ranch years earlier. Whenever anyone mentioned offering shelter to tribal families during harsh winters, Jacob answered coldly that no Apache would ever cross his land alive. Winter arrived earlier than expected that year. Thick clouds swallowed the mountains while icy winds buried trails beneath endless snow. Ranchers hurried livestock into barns, knowing the coming blizzard could trap anyone caught outdoors. Jacob secured every fence, stacked firewood beside the cabin, and prepared to survive several days completely isolated from neighboring settlements. Late that night, furious knocking echoed through the storm. Jacob grabbed his rifle before opening the heavy wooden door. Standing outside was a young Apache woman wrapped in torn blankets, barely able to remain standing. Snow covered her dark hair, while trembling hands clutched a small leather pouch. Her frightened eyes silently begged for mercy before exhaustion overcame her. Jacob remembered every bitter promise he had ever spoken. Part of him wanted to close the door immediately. Yet another part saw only a freezing human being moments from death. After several painful seconds, compassion defeated anger. He lowered his rifle, lifted the unconscious stranger into his cabin, and placed her beside the crackling fireplace to warm slowly. By morning, the woman regained consciousness. She introduced herself as Ayanna, 23 years old, traveling with relatives before the blizzard scattered everyone across the mountains. She thanked Jacob for saving her life and apologized for bringing trouble onto his ranch. Jacob answered quietly that once the weather improved, she would continue her journey without delay or argument. The storm refused to end. Snow drifted higher than windows, blocking every trail leaving the ranch. Jacob and Ayanna remained trapped together for nearly a week. During long evenings beside the fireplace, silence slowly gave way to conversation. They discovered both had lost parents while young, learned responsibility early, and carried painful memories they rarely shared. One afternoon, Jacob finally admitted why he hated Apache people. As a frightened boy, he had witnessed armed riders burn abandoned buildings near his family's ranch. Neighbors insisted Apache warriors were responsible. Since then, Jacob never questioned the story. Ayanna listened patiently before explaining many criminal gangs often disguised themselves to blame tribal communities for frontier violence and theft. Her words unsettled Jacob deeply. He remembered never actually seeing who attacked his father's ranch. Everything he believed came from frightened rumors repeated across nearby towns. For the first time, doubt entered his heart. He realized years of bitterness might have been built upon assumptions instead of proven truth, leaving him ashamed of his stubborn prejudice. When the blizzard finally weakened, Jacob harnessed his strongest horses to search for survivors. Ayanna insisted on joining despite dangerous conditions. Together they discovered an overturned wagon buried beneath snow. Inside shivered an elderly rancher and his injured grandson. Working together, Jacob and Ayanna rescued both before freezing temperatures claimed their lives forever that desperate afternoon. The rescue spread quickly across nearby settlements. Ranchers praised Jacob's courage, while several were surprised to learn an Apache woman had helped save the family. Some remained suspicious, but others began questioning old prejudices. Action spoke louder than rumors. Ayanna had risked her own safety without hesitation, proving character mattered far more than background or appearance. Days later, a small group of Apache riders cautiously approached Jacob's ranch. Jacob reached for his rifle before recognizing relief upon Ayanna's face. They were her relatives, who had searched tirelessly after the storm separated everyone. Their leader thanked Jacob respectfully for protecting Ayanna during the blizzard and offered several healthy horses as gifts of gratitude and friendship. Jacob accepted only a handmade blanket woven by Ayanna's grandmother. He explained saving someone's life should never require payment. The elder smiled, saying true gifts honored kindness rather than purchased it. Before leaving, the Apache leader invited Jacob to visit their winter camp whenever peace allowed, promising he would always be welcomed as an honored guest. Several weeks later, trouble returned unexpectedly. A ruthless outlaw gang began stealing cattle throughout the valley while leaving false evidence suggesting Apache involvement. Remembering Ayanna's earlier warning, Jacob refused to believe the accusations. Instead, he rode directly to the tribal camp, where both communities agreed to work together instead of allowing criminals to divide innocent people again. Tracking fresh hoofprints through snowy canyons, Jacob and several Apache scouts discovered the hidden outlaw camp beside a frozen river. They surrounded the thieves before dawn. Without unnecessary bloodshed, the gang surrendered after realizing escape was impossible. Stolen cattle, forged branding irons, and counterfeit tribal markings exposed the criminals responsible for years of fear and misunderstanding across the frontier. When the sheriff announced the arrests, many townspeople apologized for wrongly blaming innocent families. Jacob stood before everyone and admitted his own mistakes first. He confessed hatred had nearly prevented him from saving Ayana's life. If compassion had not overcome pride that snowy night, countless innocent people might have continued suffering because lies remained unchallenged. Spring arrived with green grass replacing deep snow. Jacob no longer posted warning signs, ordering Apache travelers away from his property. Instead, exhausted travelers found fresh water, warm meals, and safe shelter regardless of their background. Neighbors noticed the remarkable change, and many slowly followed his example after witnessing the peace cooperation created throughout the valley. One quiet evening, Ayana returned carrying fresh bread and wildflowers gathered from mountain meadows. Smiling warmly, she thanked Jacob again for opening his door during the worst storm either had ever faced. Jacob replied that the blizzard had not simply saved one freezing stranger. It had rescued his own heart from years of unnecessary hatred. Together they watched the Wyoming sunset, grateful that one act of compassion had transformed enemies into trusted friends and brought lasting peace to everyone who called the frontier home.